In this video, I will take this free Fab asset of electric pole and transform it into a optimal usable game asset. First, I will download the asset, and then I will have these folders, and in the materials, as you can see, there are a ton of materials instance. Like for one asset only, there will be 6 material. This is a really overdraw kill. So we need to figure out how to optimize this. I just wanted to use a free asset to create a quick scene, but this asset is not optimal, and could be a nice example for the LayerCraft, how it can be optimized, your regular asset, your existing assets, and you can create your custom unique variations of it. So as you can see, we have 7 material slots for one static mesh. I will just duplicate the static mesh and let's place it to compare. In the wireframe mode, as you can see, the vertex count can be a bit high in these details. I really don't need this kind of many face counts. So I will just export this as a static mesh, as a FBX to the Blender. And in the Blender, I will create a workaround to optimize this asset. So in the Blender part, we are just dealing with the topology and the face groups, the vertex groups that we can paint easily in the Blender. That I will define the material types by the vertex color, which is the most optimal way to separate the ID mask. Think of it like an ID mask in the substance where you paint a certain UV area for a specific material, but instead we will just bake this color, this masking information as part of the static mesh that we call vertex color. Then we will easily just reference into our layer blend system that we will mask out certain layers with certain vertex colors. I hope it makes sense. Here, after all this decimation, all this operation, we have a triangle count. The face is it was 42,000, but now we have 11,000. So I will just want to separate the common material slots that I will use as material layers. So I want the cables as different layers, as well as the metal parts and the wooden parts. So there will be 3-layer system. Then I will bake the vertex color for each type. Then I will combine all together. So I am just separating the mesh parts for different objects in the Blender, so I can paint all the vertex in the same color. In this case, I just need red and green. The background layer I can use for the blue. So there will be 3 layers, but 2 masks. So Control tab or this menu, I go to the vertex paint. We have our vertex color and we have only one material slot, which means we will just use one draw call for this mesh. And since we are going to use this as a spline mesh, there will be only one draw call for all the spline meshes, as they will be part of this instant static mesh workflow. Here, back in Unreal, we have our vertex color as correctly, and we have only one material slot, which means we will just use one draw call for this mesh. So let's create our material instance for this. We will create this from scratch, so it will be a great example for us. Let's assign the material to the static mesh, and then let's try to understand the material of the original mesh. Like there is this rusty metal parts that we can just use a layer for this. So in the material instance, first thing we will do, we will set the parents, which is the material craft. I will just enable the layer craft and switch to the layer parameters. And by default, we have this black. There will be no value, but also if I notice, the cables on the original asset is also like a one scalar material. So I can just select under the layer parameters, use raw layer, which is actually just a scalar value for specular, roughness, and metallic, and just a simple vector tree for the color. So I can just play with these values and I can leave as it is for the background layer. And then I will just apply my rusty metal and wooden beams as the additional layers. So first, let's create the spaces. Let's add the layers and then the layer blender. And in the master blender, I will only select the paint mask. I will just enable. By default, it is using vertex color and also the red channel, which is fine. And on the additional layer on the top, I will enable also the paint layer, but I will just select the red green channel instead of the red. This is the only change I do. And this is all set in our blend assets. So let's figure out what kind of layers we are going to apply. First, let's see of the original mesh. So we have this wooden texture that is being used, but this is UV wrapped and we cannot use this. We can just mimic this kind of like wooden texture. So first, let's see, we have this rusty metal texture and we can just add our albedo, then the ORD and the normal, a full PBR for the color and for the material. So the textile density will be same in every place and already looking quite nice. You don't need a specific UV mapping. Beautiful thing about the layer materials. So I will just maybe eliminate the using of albedo texture and just switch to the color as raw, and I can just set this color and use a mask texture, the mask, to use the packed texture. Right now by the green we are masking by the roughness values. So by the roughness I can just darken my static scalar color. So we can just break up some kind of uniform in the color information without additional color texture. So this is a really cheap way. In the end, how many textures are you using is the definition of how much expensive your material is. So for the middle layer, we can select some kind of wooden texture, and by the correct UV direction, we can have this beam, this wooden structure really quickly. And again, you can have a really cool special wooden texture also, but also you can use the same wooden texture for additional parts, additional assets. That's a fence that can be using the same texture with different values, maybe a little bit offset, so that we can darken the color here. So we can have really customized and low budget for the memory for each asset. Like instead of a UV mapped texture for each asset, we can have our tileable textures that can be reused again and again. So this is a really smart way to play with the big environments. So again, I can just bypass the roughness, the packed map, and I can use albedo texture that I have already sampled for the base color. And I can use the same information, just some kind of pattern, some kind of variation from the color to the roughness. In the different channels, you can just with a high contrast with different amounts. It can be look very nice without any extra map. As you can see, two textures all together, very nicely done. So this is how we optimize it. Is also like I just compare the platform stats, and even our one material instance with 3 layers can be optimized, even more optimized than a regular fab asset, fab material, even though it's just using the static textures and all the other things. If you don't optimize well enough, there can be many unnecessary calculations going under the hood that you don't even notice. So this is why I really highly recommend that you own the workflow, you know your assets, your materials, how they are created, how many slots are there. Like, compare this to other each asset you need to check actually, and many of the fab assets that you probably use start with free assets that can be having really bad optimization. So with the LayerCraft you can just control, you can transform all this unnecessary thing, because you usually need the model actually, the materializing, the adding textures. This is where your art will be different from the rest. So you need a better way to control your assets and the materials and everything for each case. And this is where the LayerCraft comes in to help you actually to create a uniform workflow for everything going on and add more complexity or remove unnecessary stuff. And it works, adapts to every workflow there are out there in the Fab. So go check it out. I think you will find it very useful.